Welcome to episode 4. Today we sit down with Steve Brown of Alpine Electronics and kind of run through his career in car audio. Obviously, you guys heard some stuff in the last episode about the demo cars that he and I built together, but he has a long history before that, and we'll dive into it today. I hope you enjoy. Here we go. Episode 4, Steve Brown.
That's life.
That's life.
That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, shot down in May. But I know I'm gonna change that tune when I'm back on top in June. I said that's life.
So we are here, episode whatever, and we have the legendary Steve Brown, world famous Steve Brown with us.
Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
We'll just get right to it. Old fashioned car audio podcast. We like to know about old stuff. You're old.
Yeah, it's true. I am.
And I want to say this is a good segue for the first guest because obviously you had time working exclusively with Gary. And then when I was talking about kind of how I came into car audio, it all started, I think, based on the badass cars that Alpine was building, right? I'm that demographic. So yeah. I'm 33. So that puts me as a teenager, 16, 17, right when I get a car at around that 2002, 2003 mark when you guys are building the awesome Alpine cars. So for me getting into the industry, I'm reverse engineering the install tidbits that you're doing in car audio mag, things like that. So that's how I'm gravitating to the industry, which again, very apropos that you're the first guest because this is what got me in. And I know that I would say based on Gary, that's where I think he's got a majority of his growth working at Alpine. So,
well, thanks, Matt. I've heard a lot of similar stories, and honestly, my story is no different. I mean, I was the same way. I got influenced by a lot of people who were doing it before me. And that's what really made it stick with me. It's hard for a kid, I say when I started out doing this, I was in high school, and to make something that you really are passionate enough about to make it a career is, it's something. And car audio is one of those things that really stuck to me. And I think the people and the innovation are two of the things that really have made it a great journey for me, and it's nice to be able to pass those things on as well.
What was the first experience you had with car audio? What made you aware of car audio?
1983 Chevrolet Camaro. Okay. So I was in band. I was a nerd in high school, and this was 8th grade for me. So this would have been 87, I want to say. And a dude that was in band, so I was a freshman at the time. He was a senior, had an 83 Camaro, and he had 2 kicker free air 10s just bolted into the rear deck of this car with no sound deadening, nothing, right? No baffling, nothing fancy, but it was the first time I'd ever really heard bass in anything. I was kind of a farm kid, so I didn't really go to concerts a lot when I was a kid, and I didn't have any kind of access to fancy home audio or anything to be able to really experience it. And that's what really hooked me was that car, because it was the first time I'd ever really experienced audio beyond a single 4x6 speaker in a dash from one of my dad's old beaters. So it struck me. And to this day, I still think the car environment is one of the best places to listen to audio because a home or a room environment it's got a lot of challenges, and it's just not really feasible or practical for most people to be able to isolate themselves in a room that's optimized for sound. But a car, it's very easy to do that with. And, it's the closest you're going to get to a live experience versus like a headphone or something like that, where you can have a high-end sound reproduction in a practically enclosable space, I guess is a good way to put it. And it struck me. And it's once I got the bug, literally it was the only thing I could think about. I mean, I'm not kidding. I had a complete car audio system before I even owned a car or knew what car I was going to have. I was already collecting the stuff. it was so crazy. And then like when I got my first car, the first thing I wanted to do beyond making it fast or making it handle or anything is I wanted to make it sound good.
Was the
And
Celica your first car?
yeah, the Celica. I bought that car when before I could drive. I bought that car when I was 15, and it was saving and learning. And I probably had 20 or 30 different systems in that car over the time I owned it. It was constantly changing and evolving because I was just always messing with it and learning.
What took you from wanting audio in the car to competition?
Well, the competition thing was just kind of it was what was happening, I guess. I mean, at the time, you didn't have the internet. You learned pretty much everything that you learned about car audio through two magazines. It was Car Audio Magazine and it was Car Stereo Review. Those are the two big ones that I started to get into. I started to pay attention to Crutchfield and learn about, because Crutchfield's always had good resources. And I started to learn about connectivity and, the ins and outs of how to make a system work and then playing with it on my own. But then, I started to hear about these car audio competitions and I asked at the time, obviously, and, I figured let's try it. So I picked an event and I went and I started going and I've met people there that I really still to this day have contact with. I mean, that's the kind of relationships that we made. And, at the time it was fun. It was a small group. They were all very passionate. Everybody kind of had their own take on it. And it was an accessible sport. I didn't have a lot of money. I was in an old beater car and I would drive to these events. I drove across the country to the Alaska finals in a 76 Celica by myself, stopping to change alternators and fix stuff along the way, but it didn't matter because even a guy like me had the capability or the opportunity to win at that event. And I did. And that's really what elevated my career, elevated my name or my status or whatever you want to call it. And it got me noticed. And it's really what started my career with Alpine 100%.
So at this moment, when you're building that car, are you experimenting? Are you just doing straightforward installs? Are you like pushing fab? How does the fab get started with Steve Brown?
My dad really, I think I have to give the most credit to him for this because my dad's he's pretty much a mechanical genius. He can take things and create and cut and do, and he still to this day, he built some pretty phenomenal stuff. And I was always influenced by that. And, the ability of him to kind of take something and fix it or make it work or change it. And I guess I picked that mindset up, and kind of being able to look at something and go, okay, I want this to be this way. That's step one, is figuring out what you want. Right. And then step two is figuring out how you want to make it actually get there. And that's kind of where the engineering comes in. And so it was a combination of kind of a vision and a capability of being able to take what I wanted to do and transfer it to my hands and transfer it to 3D through a lot of different methods. And, when I started, it was very basic stuff. I mean, I used to use basically a jigsaw, table saw, and some, really basic hand tools to create a lot of my first systems. But, I evolved as time went on and learned. And, you learn that things save you time and make things a lot easier as you get older. But it doesn't actually get far from me from the hands-on part. I love the hands-on and being able to just look at something and put my hands on it and create it. And that's always kind of what's driven, I guess, my interest in car audio in general and fabrication in general.
That's cool.
I always joke that out of everybody I've ever worked with, I've never seen someone so skilled at a jigsaw. Like Steve can look at something and he can sketch with a Sharpie, right? Like he'll draw a line for rib work and something for fabrication. He'll draw it with a Sharpie. He'll grab a jigsaw and how some people have to concentrate really hard at driving and other people are just whipping down the road. Yeah. And Steve just kind of whips down the road and you look down and there's black on both sides of the cut. Yeah. He's that accurate.
And there's no drafting of the blade.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I learned early on to maximize the basic tools that you have. It's great to have nice tools. Don't get me wrong. I love that. And it saves time. And in production work, it certainly is. is everything. But to me, I still love just basic hands-on fabrication.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
So I guess when you were building that car, were you doing fab in it? Were you just getting straight to it, or were you just
Yeah,
starting with sound quality from
the
there?
first thing I ever did really in that Celica was door panels, and I wanted to put, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I did an array. I did a dual 6 and a tweeter in the middle, and I had to create this kind of panel to make it all work. And it was my first time really messing with MDF, messing with vinyl, and I kind of built it from there. And I eventually started doing fiberglass work on that car. And honestly, I didn't know anything about fiberglass work until I met one dude, and Gary's going to know who I'm talking about, and it's Fishman. And you won't believe the level of work this guy was doing in the early 90s was freaking phenomenal. I mean, he was doing stuff that was so far beyond anybody else, working with acrylic and vinyl and fab and routers and fiberglass. And, he was one of those guys that when you go to car audio events, you meet two kinds of people. You meet the people that want to show you everything, and then the people that don't want to show you anything. Right. And there were both of those types of guys at IASCA events. And I always gravitated towards the guys that were more open and had their cars open. And Fish was that guy. He was a guy who would show you anything. He would show you exactly how to build it and walk you through every step. And so that kind of influenced me early on, because not only did I pick those skills up, but it kind of reminded me that as I gained those skills, to share them. And that's one of the things that when we were doing all those Alpine builds, it was really important to us to document those builds and to share that information, because as you mentioned, Matt, guys like you were looking at that stuff and learning and building your careers based on it, and then taking it to the next level, which is everything, right? We kind of took it to a certain place, and then I think now, you look at some of the stuff that guys like Jeremy, Carlson are doing and doing everything digitally. That's kind of an evolution of all the work that all of us have done, and kind of constantly evolving. And it's pretty cool to have been a part of that timeline, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Fish, because I attended Fish Camp in, 2005. And it was the first time I had an experience of seeing somebody of his caliber building something firsthand. So for me, I had already learned, fabrication, really just reverse engineering stuff from the articles that you did when you were doing all that with Car Audio Mag and Alpine. And just seeing him, motorize and layer different pieces upon pieces, insert on insert on insert. That's kind of when I came from like a one-dimensional to a two-dimensional to a three-dimensional, and I could start having things layered on, layered and inset and things like that. He taught me a lot. He really opened up kind of my whole idea and thinking into fabrication. If you broke down his body, I'm sure there's at least 20% of him that's like rage gold from everything that he's inhaled in his lifetime.
Another 20% alcohol residue too.
Yeah. He was there one day, and I think Jason Anderson had dumped like body filler dust in his big gulp, and he took a sip, and then everyone starts laughing, and then he takes another sip, and then everyone tells him what it is, and then he just like pops the lid and like downs the whole thing.
That's Fish.
Like he didn't care.
He's crazy.
Yeah, he is literally crazy.
Yeah,
he literally is crazy. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But but it's guys like that, and I think that's what's great about the industry. The industry's full of characters like that, and it makes it interesting. I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, not all. We could all be spending our time doing just about anything. We're all smart, capable guys, but there's something that draws people to this industry. I've seen it happen multiple times, especially with Alpine employees. They just get sucked into it. And I think the people have a lot to do with that.
It's definitely fun. I always joke that like somebody's job is to count paper clips or something. Like it's definitely cool that we get to do fun stuff and listen to music and fabricate and make stuff, and you have a sense of accomplishment at the end of each day. And
yeah,
it's pretty unique.
Yeah, it's funny. I was when I was doing my whole story about how I got into this, I went to UTI in Orlando to learn the whole mechanical side because I feel like you can't really be a master of your craft unless you understand the full spectrum of what you're doing, right? So, if I'm doing something on a car and there's something wrong with the engine because of what I do, I want to learn and know how to fix that. So I went to UTI, then I did Installer Institute and Fish Camp, and then I came home and I worked for Lexus and I was a mechanic. And spending like 6 hours replacing a cam seal and the end result, like it just doesn't leak anymore. The customer doesn't even want to have the car there. Your work is like, you're getting nothing in return. You don't have a payoff. And car audio, I mean, even if you're doing the most simplistic job, a set of speakers, a radio, there's a payoff because you're improving something. And then of course, when you do it to like the level that, we do it, it's a whole different story. It's at that point, it's like you're moving people, it's therapy. And
there's a little bit of a cowboy factor to it too. It's like, you never quite know how it's going to come out. You build a ported box and you design it, you think, okay, it does this and this, and then you put it in the car and sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, sometimes you're not so pleasantly surprised. But the point is you learn from the experience, and it's it's not always a set. I'm going to do this, like you said with the cam seal.
Right.
What's going to happen unless you screwed it up. It's going to work the way it was supposed to work to begin with.
Right.
There's no creativity in it.
So have you ever? Because I know anytime that I build something where it's really cool, and I always have the fear in the back of my head. I'm just like, fuck, man, I hope this sounds good.
Yeah, totally.
Like it looks so good, and you're just like,
especially when it looks good, because then if you're gonna have to change it, you're gonna have to tear it up, and that's gonna drive you nuts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so. Have you ever built something really cool and just like scrapped it for the fact that it just didn't work out the way that you were hoping?
Yeah, I'd like to think that it doesn't happen as much as it could, but it does happen. It's inevitable. I mean, there's a lot of variables, and working on things that you don't expect, like boats, for example. Gary and I built a boat that was pulled. Look, Gary still doesn't have any damn hair from the boat project.
Boat. I might get a tattoo right here.
Took that chunk of Gary's young livelihood right there.
Right.
But it's that kind of thing. It challenges you, and you try to learn from your mistakes and apply those things to the next build and improve it. And that's the key.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the evolution for all car audio, and especially the higher end systems, is you learn what to do and what not to do. We talked the story, Matt, when one of the biggest things when I was coming up was when we did that car for Rick Rubin and he wasn't happy with it. And you take that time, and if it's not for those failures, you don't grow at all. And you've got to be pushing. If you're not failing, you're not pushing.
Yeah. Like I said, my favorite quote is the masters failed at everything the beginners never tried. Because that's like the truest shit ever.
Hey, Gary, you remember the hood on the RLS?
we talked about the hood of the RLS. I think the two of the stories that you're going to like, I told the story of like my first big project when we were doing the Sinister Six, and I had started framing up the woofer box in the back, and you were going on vacation or on a training trip or something somewhere. And like, we're staring at the back of the car and you're explaining this. And I'm like, he and I have never really worked that much together. And he's explaining something. And I'm like, I think I get what he's saying, but it doesn't make any sense. And I spend the whole week while you're gone building all this stuff. And then you get back and we're looking at it. I'm like, I just kind of want to throw it away and start over. And you're like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, yeah, it's definitely interesting working with new people. I mean, you got to work with quite a crew of characters building crazy stuff. So
I sure did. Yeah, very fortunate, and I got to be honest with you, I learned something from each and every person that I work with, multiple things. And there's also a dynamic and it's hard to describe it. When you're working on a project that's really time constrained, and that was really always a problem with those demo cars, was the time. It wasn't the money or the lack of resources. It was time was the main limitation. So to be able to perform in those high pressure situations, it puts people in a different mindset. And some people step up and really it drives them, and other people it kind of crushes them. And you kind of learn right away when you're working with somebody if they're with those types, which type of person they are. And every one of the people I work with, I was lucky enough that they were the guys that are going to stay and step up and get the thing done. And that's at the end of the day, that's when CES is 5 days away, things got to go on the truck tomorrow morning. That's important.
Before I started Alpine, I was ready to get out of doing that stuff, and then obviously that job comes available, and it's not something you want to turn down. You want to go for it, but I feel like I had trained for that job, with the years at APC of building. We were bringing like 25 cars to SEMA, and everyone had painted fiberglass in it. It's like I was used to that. I can't imagine some of the people that I've worked alongside since then trying to like jump into that scenario. Like we go to Mobile Solutions, and it's like picture that last 24 hours or 48 hours before we left for CES, and that's what we're doing, trying to bang out a cool project and show these guys what we can do. And I still have that mentality of 15 years ago when my body worked better, right? Like not a, you're never afraid to bite off too much, and you just go for it. And then I see like the pace that some people work at, and I'm just like, really, you should be going faster. Like,
Yeah, pace is important. We always had a pretty high work pace. We started out with those builds, and it was a regular kind of a normal schedule. But by the last 2 months, or 3 months,
well, the builds were only 3 months long. What are you talking about?
But it got pretty intense.
So when you do a typical Alpine project like that, and you're trying to pace it, as you say, are you going into each day saying, okay, I should be at least here by the end of the day, and then you kind of don't leave until you get there, or how does that work?
Well, what normally happens with big projects like that is you have logical stopping points, right? Like, give you an example. Like, we built the bodies on a lot of those cars from scratch. So if you're going to lay up the fiberglass on the body of a car, you're going to do it in one sitting, and it's going to suck. But you're going to get it done because you want it to cure, and then you want it to be cured for the next day when you come in, and you can work some more on it. So I think it naturally kind of lends itself to that. You work until you get to a stage where you're comfortable, to where tomorrow you're where you need to be. But there is another factor that I learned early on with those projects, and there's a point at which you have to stop fabricating and start finishing, and you have to know when that is. And there's kind of a ratio, maybe 2 to 1, two times, 3 to 1, maybe 3 times the time fabricating versus 1 finishing, depending on the level of finishing. But in those cases, we were painting almost all the panels in those cars. So you think about all the steps that go into that, and we're doing that all in house. So you have to plan for all that time, and if you don't, you end up with a poorly finished vehicle, which I've always thought is a shame. If you really took the time to engineer it and build it correctly, but you finish it poorly, that's what everybody sees, and they're not ever really going to see the good stuff maybe you did in the first 60% of the build, because you did the last 40% poorly.
Yeah, I think that's one thing on the Alpine cars that always stood out was like the gapping and the seam work and the lack of visible fasteners and all of that attention to detail was what really set it apart. Because those hot import nights era days, there was a lot of, as Brian Schmidt likes to say, fiberglass volcanoes in the backs of cars. And there was a lot of poorly done glass work where like, I mean, stuff that like I literally look at, how could somebody put base coat on that? Like, what makes you think you're anywhere close to being done?
Yeah, it's time consuming. There's no question about it. It's just a lot of labor to do that stuff right, and it's planning too. Because, like you said, hiding fasteners is basically stacking in a logical format to where you get to a point where everything's covered, but it's still able to be disassembled. But you have to think about that before. You have to plan it as you're designing the project, and not think about it last minute.
Yeah, those imperfections that you'd always see on show cars, I always refer to it as like the dead pixel on a TV. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You could be 65 feet away, and you're right in on that dead pixel. And that's kind of like the way that I always tackle the things that I build. Is I kind of have that dead pixel mentality, and even if something is like so minutely imperfect, I try and make it perfect, because I know that a lot of the stuff I'm doing is from out of state, and this car could be broken down in another state, and somebody's going to know that I built it. And obviously it has to be perfect.
Yeah. You tend to be your own worst critic. I mean, I know I am with everything I do. It doesn't matter what it is, but I'm the one that has to stare at it at the end of the day. If I'm not happy with it, I'm going to make it to where I am. Otherwise I can't stand it. That kind of mentality, I think, of all of the top installers that I've met in my life, they all share that perfectionist mentality. It's like it's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, it you can't unapply it. It applies to everything in your life. I mean, Gary, look at your Volkswagens. Perfect example. It's something. It's a passion that just oozes over into everything, whether you want it to
Yeah.
or not.
I heard a good quote, and it was somewhere along the lines of perfection is the enemy of progress. And
It's true.
it really makes you think about all the hours I've wasted doing stupid stuff on cars that, have gone on to get sold or whatever it is. And it's like, I
Yeah.
spent so much time on that one little detail to make it perfect.
We did that with a lot of the cars. We built a lot of little Easter eggs into those cars. And it was just to see how much people were paying attention. And I love it when people would catch that kind of stuff, because then they're really looking at it. I go to car show, go to a car show, Jeep show, whatever it is. And your eye, you can't turn your eye off, right? You're going to gravitate towards the stuff that's built correctly. And you can always spot the stuff that's just marginal, right? Paint, you can see orange peel on paint from 20 feet away and know, okay, or just a little bit of a wave on a big panel on a car and just know, well, it was compromised. It wasn't done correctly. There's right and there's not. And the ones that are done to a high level are just unbelievably flawless. And, as an installer, you know what it takes to make that happen.
Yeah. The other hard part with like on the big demo car type stuff too, is that you do have to kind of manage that striving for perfection, striving for grabbing everyone's attention when it gets there. But you also have to finish. You
Yep.
have to finish. Not finishing is not an option.
Yeah. There's things you're not going to like about it. And, if you gave us an extra year, we'd probably take the extra year finishing.
Yeah.
But doesn't necessarily mean it's realistic, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you had your Celica. Take me through after that. How did you first professionally get started in the industry? Where'd you go from there?
And don't leave out the jigsaw in the kitchen story.
Yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, I mean, that Celica was my high school car, and then I went to college at University of Washington, anyway. I back up a little bit. I grew up in Washington State. In Washington State, where I grew up on the rural eastern side of it, really not much going on car audio wise. But I went to college in Seattle, and over there was a lot more activity, and that's really what got me into it, because I took that car to college with me. And as Gary mentioned, I had about a 400 square foot 1-bedroom apartment that I would do all the work out of. I would jigsaw, fiberglass in my kitchen, paint stuff in my kitchen, much to my wife's dismay.
Your neighbors were so bitter.
Oh yeah, terrible. I mean, fortunately, my neighbors were pretty crappy, so they couldn't really say much. But if they were better people, they would have definitely had a leg to stand on. But I mean, you can imagine me out there in Seattle rain, working on this car 24/7, trying to make it cool enough to compete. And so I started taking it to competitions, and I was in Tacoma, which is a subsidiary kind of Seattle. Mm. And I was at a competition. I asked a show, and I'm just hanging out, doing what I do. I had the car open. I was talking to everybody that came by, and this guy named Jeff Jones, who happened to be an Alpine rep, the Alpine rep for Seattle at the time, came by and started chatting me up. And we talked for at least an hour, just about the car. And, he was asking me kind of what I was doing in it. And I gave him a demo, and I didn't really think much of it. But I must have been about a month later, I get a call out of the blue, and it's Jeff. And he says, "Hey, man, we got a job at Alpine. It's in Southern California. Would you like to fly down tomorrow, no less, for an interview?" So I did, with zero experience. I mean, as far as business or, selling car stereos or anything like that. By some miracle, I got the job as a field merchandising rep, which is really the lowliest position you could have at Alpine at the time. It meant that you had to essentially train, at the time, Circuit City employees on how to not screw up their Alpine product too bad. That's what I started doing. And once I got the job, I kept the car for a little while, but eventually I decided I had to buy something that was going to be better, more reliable. So I bought a 1988 Acura Legend. And you guys probably remember that car. And that was the car that, I won the finals with it. And that car probably had more iterations than any other vehicle I've ever built or owned, because from the time I bought it to the time I sold it, I mean, it had gone through so many different phases of different Alpine products and different fabrication techniques, and adding a lot of motorization, adding a lot of equalization capability and different speaker arrangements. And it was a test bed. And it was a learning bed for me. And I used it to really kind of further my skill set.
Was that built in Torrance? Was that built at Alpine?
No, that car was entirely built in my garage. I built that. So I started, when I started with Alpine, I started for about a year, a little bit more than a year in Washington. And then I moved to Northern California, and I was there for a couple of years. And that's where most of that car was built. And I was doing a lot of the competition in Northern and Southern California. And then in 99, Alpine decided to kind of make the demo car position full time. So I moved down to Southern California in 99, and then started working down there full time. And that's really when we started getting more heavily into the demo vehicle annual application.
Was Chris already doing demo car stuff? Was he already there? I take it.
Yeah, he kind of had a different path. I mean, he started in tech support. So with Alpine, you usually either start in tech support or you start in the field. And I was the field guy, so he was a tech support guy. And in 99, it became an official department. Before that, he ran the shop at Alpine. I would come in. We had some of the other FMRs that would come in and help fabricate these vehicles. But then in 99, we decided to make it like more of a full-time position.
Who else was there at that time? Was like Glenn Pass there yet, or
Glenn was there? Yeah, Glenn had been there, but he wasn't really on that side of it though. He was more on the research side of it, engineering side of it.
Yeah, is that like Rich Co days? Is that
Rich Co is a little before my time. I started in 95. Rich, I think, was done in I want to say 90, early 90s. Okay.
We're gonna have to do a history of Alpine episode.
Oh man, there was a lot of history before I even came into it. How Alpine in the 80s was just like everything you can imagine an 80s company being. It was like Wolf of Wall Street stuff. These guys going out and getting hammered. It was badass, and car audio was that then. And it evolved. And in the 90s was equally cool and crazy, but kind of in a different way. And that's really where I came into it. And I mean, we had some great times. The CES, the build up and bringing that car out at that show there's something about that like I can't imagine a better experience. It was just it was a combination of relief and pride and just and nervousness and anticipation about what are people going to think of it. But then you'd get there, we'd be up for already 24, 48 hours, and you got to somehow get this car wedged into the booth and not destroy it. That's a whole nother story in itself. Remember Tony Bichetti almost dying?
Oh, yeah. There's a few great stories along.
Oh, there's several. And then you get that all done, and then you see this line of guys standing outside the booth waiting to get in, and they don't want to see anything but your car. That's why they're there. And that, to me, is just the best feeling.
That's cool. So when they started this demo car division, is this something that the people in your space pushed for, or is this something that the top of Alpine pushed for? Whose idea was it to start building these elaborate demo cars?
It's weird. It kind of evolved. Like at first, we weren't building crazy stuff. We were building more like, so I'll give you an example. The first projects that we worked on, actually the first couple projects I worked on at Alpine were existing trucks. They were regional demo cars. They were kind of average, okay level of fabrication, and then, nice system and some graphics, and off you go. And then we came in and we started building like multiples of regional vehicles. So, for example, we built a Dodge Durango that had pretty nice system in it. I think 4 amps, 412s, some fabrication work, nothing really elaborate, but at the time, pretty cool. And I think we built 4 of those for different regions of the country. And so it kind of evolved from, okay, this is a, not real innovative, but effective way to convey our wares, if you will. But then some influences started to come in. Car culture kind of heated up. It's the only way I can describe it. You think about what was going on in the late 90s. Hot Import Nights was getting big. Tuner car stuff was getting big. And it was creating a really kind of a second wave of hot rodding almost in the industry. And in hot rodding, and that was kind of on the downslope at the time. So it was an opportunity for a new generation of installers to come up and show what they could do. And it was a different type of approach, whereas, you had Big Daddy Ed Roth and, George Barris and all these guys making custom cars in the 60s. it was limited to a certain kind of look and feel. And then in the 90s, I think it kind of evolved again into a different way, more loud paint, more fiberglass, more things like that to really catch your eye. And I think that's what really started to drive it. I guess probably what really started it, if I had to answer, be put on the spot to answer that question, it was F number one status. The first generation of F1 status was 1999. And it was when we decided, okay, let's take the skills that we'd learned with these, building these regional cars, and let's make something that's unique and that's focused on sound. And so we started really designing a car that could do that. That it kind of coincided with finally being done with the Acura Legend, selling it, and I actually bought a BMW M3, and we started working on that car, and we built the first F1 status system into that car in the early 2000s, and it got a lot of attention. And a lot of the work in that car was hidden, but it was innovative, and it was at the time there wasn't a lot of that stuff going on. And then you started to pepper in the Hot Import Nights influence, and it started to kind of take the builds more crazy and more visual. And that's where you got things like the Civic and the RSX that then led into some of the supercars later on. But it wasn't like a corporate, entity at Alpine going, we're going to do this. It kind of evolved from we're doing this, and let's do it a little more, and let's do it a little more, and let's just kind of see where it takes us. And people liked it, so we kept doing it, and we kept pushing it.
I felt like the BMW really did kind of open that door. And what I liked about it was that it kind of pushed where the Hot Import Night scene got really, it was really pushed by how much attention you could grab with your car at a show. And so lighting and a lot of stuff with that kind of nighttime atmosphere and stuff really took off. But the BMW to me, the BMW holds up today from an integration standpoint, where we went through that, what we'll call the Hot Import Nights phase, and we've kind of come full circle to where now, from a fabrication standpoint, the look everybody goes for is this kind of integrated, did it come that way? Did somebody build that? Did they fabricate it? But then on top of that, you guys took the time to do some pretty innovative, I don't know if it would be innovative at the time, but to me, like the fender well enclosures for the mid-base drivers up front is like, it's amazing. I told Matt the story of the first time we had done enclosures like that in the front of a car in, I want to say it was 98. We did that in the Navigator, and it's like this night and day like experience to do something like that. And that stuff was tied in to like a real demo car and a usable car, not something that was just going to sit there and just give sound demos. Where did that come from? What's the story behind the fender well enclosures?
Well, I knew that it was the right direction. In the Acura, I had played around, like I said, with a lot of different speaker configurations. And what I ended up having in that car is I had ended up building a custom dash and a 6.5 in the top of each corner of the dash with an enclosure behind it. It was, like you said, it was revolutionary from going to like a door mounted mid-bass kind of a configuration to where there's a limitation. You can sound deaden it, you can try to seal it all you want, but at the end of the day, it's not a sealed, predictable enclosure. And that door panel has to do other stuff besides just hold your speaker, unfortunately. So, it's not it's poor in a lot of ways. That the enclosure in that car was, well, first of all, the M3 or the E36 in general is just a beautiful car to do that in because it has a ton of space. So whenever we look at a car and we try to decide what to do, a lot of it, you have to base it on what the car will let you do. And that was one of the things right off that we noticed it. Man, we can build some killer kick panels into this thing and actually weld them in and make them real. So it was kind of an evolution of what I had started with the Acura, and what just based on that experience, knowing that those kick panels, getting them down far in there on axis, and talk about a big commitment, right? You're hacking a huge hole in this car and welding in a new panel. There's no really going back, and it's got to work, right? And I was pretty confident that it would, but once we got it done, it was actually exceeding my expectations. It was impressive.
So do you think that the BMW was the car that kind of changed everything and kind of started the trajectory of what Alpine started to become known for?
It certainly started. It was the first real supercar, if you want to call it that. And when I say that, I guess I mean a couple things. First of all, a pretty elaborate labor timeline, right? Which that car certainly, there's probably 2,500 hours in that car at least. And also just a system integration from start to finish. You know what I mean? Like a real theme, I guess is the best way to put it. There were a lot of things in that car that were done that way because kind of had to be that way. A good example is there was the center console of that thing. We took a clear model of an E36 RC body, and we actually molded it into the top cover of this center console. And underneath it were fuses with LEDs on the fuses, and the fuses corresponded to different components based on the section in the car. So if you wanted to know if their fuse was blown, you just looked at it. You could see where the fuse was blown and what part of the car it corresponded to. So it's kind of little stuff like that, just ergonomically and thinking practically. Like Gary said, making the car usable. The car was really a usable, drivable car, and I drove it quite often. So
was that car built to compete, or was it built as a demo?
Well, it was built as both, but we never really built it as a serious competition car. I mean, at the time, the expert class was where we would have had to compete with it, and that's not really where it was happening. It was really in the pro classes. It wouldn't have really been fair to compete with the kind of resources that we were dealing with. But we took it to Iasca. We took second, I think, in 2001 with it. But It wasn't really primarily designed as that. It was mainly designed to be an F number 1 status demo vehicle.
And was that before or after the Excursion?
That was after the Excursion.
Yeah. So the Excursion was pretty elaborate from a fabrication standpoint too. Working backwards, Excursion was, I guess every car kind of pushed the boundaries, but Excursion to me was the first one that I remember as being like, holy crap, there was always the Rockford demo car that would come out, and it was like the Rockford, I don't want to say play it safe, but it was kind of predictable. Like it was, you knew what it was gonna look like. And I think the Alpine cars kind of got that way a little bit, right? Lots of painted glass and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And always pushing it. But like you always, for years, I remember walking into CES and Rockford always had the first booth when it moved indoors, right? Yep. Rockford always had the first booth, and like you'd walk through the door and you'd smell the contact adhesive from the vinyl, because they just wrapped. And it was for years it was either a van or a Suburban or whatever it was, and a wall of 615s or 815s or 1215s or however many 15s it was that year, and you'd always get hit with that smell. Yeah, I felt like the Excursion was the one that kind of like deviated, and with the painted stuff and it was a little
painted stuff. It had the amp rack, which was pretty unique, and it was really one of the first cars we used metal in. Believe it or not, I don't know if you remember the floating amp racks on that thing. They came back. They almost looked like the Star Trek engine nacelles, right? But to be able to do that kind of stuff, we learned early on that you had to use steel because it was the only way to get enough strength. And I think that's one of the things that it's like one of the building blocks to get from where you are when you're starting this project to be able to start making these ever crazier combinations. And, the fiberglass fab was certainly one of those innovations. The steel was one of those innovations. Being able to fiberglass fabricate quickly with our kind of our frame technique that we did, we applied that to a lot of different things. And it's a great technique because you can really use it for almost anything. I mean, we use it to build complete anything from, little speaker pods to complete car bodies, and it works equally well in pretty much all those applications. So, some of those building blocks of fab skills, and we would kind of raise a bar with each one and try to take it to the next level with each one. That if you look at the amp rack in the Excursion, you can kind of see where the center console / processor rack for the M3 came from. And then when you look at the fab in the M3, you can start to see where things like the center seat idea and the gauges for the Civic came from, how it kind of wrapped around you. So it was one thing kind of led to another, and it kept evolving. We kept thinking about ways to make it unique. And one of the things I learned about show cars is there needs to be a hook. There has to be something that people remember. And, in a sea of everything the same, no matter how cool it is, you're never going to stand out. So our cars always had something that was unique. You could call it a gimmick. You could call it a unique feature, whatever it is. But I guarantee you that when you saw it, you would remember it. Right?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So when I was coming up during the Hot Import Nights era, again, when these cars were being built, I'm 16, 17 years old. I have an Eclipse GSX. It has one suicide door, one Lambo door, and it had a super taillight conversion. And the whole inside was completely painted in fiberglass. So It was like the different bit. You had to be different. So
Yeah.
one suicide door, one Lambo door, and super taillights. You'd remember it.
I mentioned the Easter eggs earlier. We'd have lots of little things we'd mess with people with. A good example was the Sinister Six taillights. At first glance, it looked like an LED taillight, which at the time was pretty, kind of unique. They weren't that popular then. But actually, it was a screen. And what we had done is we'd made a video that looked like an LED taillight that was on 99.9% of the time. But then that 1% of the time, it would flash to a movie clip for about a second and then flash back to the taillight. And watching people's reaction to this was great because somebody would notice it and then try to point it out to their friends who could have obviously not then see it because it had changed, and then trying to convince them they're not crazy and that they did really see what they saw. And after about 5 minutes of arguing, you'd have to come over and tell them, no, you're right. You did see this. Let me show you what you saw. And then they'd not have to kill each other.
and that's literally by design. Like we had conversations that were like, not only do you have to attract people to the car, you have to keep them there to create that kind of mob mentality when it's at a show. And boy, does it work. Boy, does it work.
It works. And it does a lot of other cool stuff. Because as you mentioned, you get a lot of people standing around the car. And these are people that in a lot of cases know what they're doing and have the fabrication skills to build those kinds of things. So they're really looking at it with a professional eye. And to see their reaction to those kinds of things is great. And everybody's always trying to pick apart everybody's work, and that's what we do. And so trying to, I guess, build to the level that's going to impress those guys is kind of what motivates us a lot, right? Because we know that at the end of the day, you want to be accepted. You want it to be accepted by your peers as much as you do all the other onlookers and customers that are at the show. And to me, it was equally important. We really wanted it to be an industry standard. We wanted it to be something that was well respected in the industry. And so we try to build it to a high standard.
I told Matt the story of when we were doing the Sinister Six, and we're like, originally we weren't trying to build the whole body of that car. We were trying to get a body kit for it and all that. And then there just became the day where I remember we just were like, we don't have a choice. We just got to, you're like, we're just going to have to build it. Right. Yeah. And like the story of like just framing out the whole front bumper in a night, you're like, just, okay, we're going to do it. And then I remember staying back and looking at it, and I was 100%. I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but I was 100% joking when I was like, since we went this far as to build the body, we got to paint it black now, right? Because that's just like the most baller shit to do would be to paint it black. And you're like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I guess we got a little body work to do.
Yeah, a little sanding, a little bit of sanding.
Yeah, just a little bit.
You don't need fingerprints anyway, Gary.
Yeah. Well, it goes in cycles. It's good to cleanse and rebirth your fingerprints.
So when you're coming up with the concepts of these cars, are you, again, because everything today is so different because we have easily integrated computers and all this other stuff. How are you coming up with concepts back then?
Well, a lot of it was influenced by things that I saw or we saw in the automotive world. I like to look at concept cars. I always have. I've always been kind of fascinated by them. I'm a very mechanical person. I love all things mechanical. I love aeronautic stuff, airplanes, the big airplane, history buff. And, all of those things, those engineering, those designs, I think they all influence, a lot of the designs. And I think it's a combination of a couple things. To me, it was always, it had to have a theme. It had to have the whole car had to have a theme, that you could see through it, that it was cohesive throughout the thing. That was always very important to me. And also the combination of kind of visual fab with mechanical uniqueness at the same time. We always had a unique mechanical function somewhere in those cars that was, some of those things were pretty crazy. Like one of the ones I don't think gets enough credit because it wasn't really easy to see was the amp rack on the RLS that came twisted and extended out the back of the vehicle. That thing was insane to build that and make it work on one motor was just ridiculous.
The one motor part was really cool.
It was cool. That mechanism, I dream about that mechanism sometimes. It was just, I love it. It's like so efficient and simple, but yet so effective, and it works so well,
So something like that. Are you how that articulates out? Is that something that you're like, this is something that I definitely want to get done and see through, and you just see it through and figure out how it works? Is there a stopping point to where, possibly that you've done something in the past and you just couldn't get it done in a certain amount of time, so you scrapped the idea? How does
I don't
that
know
work?
that we ever gave up on any ideas.
You know,
Like,
yeah, no,
can you think of one that we failed at and did like that we just went, oh, there's no way we're gonna figure that out, or like there was always a way.
yeah, no, I don't think so. You know, I mean, we ran ourselves into some pretty difficult challenges, but I mean, there's a lot of I don't know. I guess one way to think of this is, and I think sometimes installers get stuck in this rut. You can't look just in your industry. There's a lot of other stuff that's out there for all kinds of other things. And that's what I mean when I say I'm a buff of lots of history and science and that kind of stuff, because it's amazing what the human brain has come up with that you have no idea exists, right? And I'll give you a good example. The bearing sliders, the lubricated machine sliders. Those things are solely responsible for making 99% of our fabrication stuff work. Without those, I don't know how else you would do it, right? So that came from a necessity in a completely different industry, but we just happen to get the benefit of it. But you'll never know it unless you go out there and you look for it. And Gary is one of the best I know at really looking out into other things and seeing how other things can be applied back into this industry. And I think that's what one of the things that drives us forward is always looking for new techniques, new materials, new methods, new tricks, right?
Now, when you walk in a building, because I know that I do this and my father-in-law does this, he's like really good on the construction side. But when I go into a building, like a lot of times Vegas, you just look around and I'm just trying to like engineer everything and seeing like what they did here. And I can't help it. It just always happens when I walk into a building. Yeah, Disney's awesome.
That place is amazing.
And it's funny, I always say that to a lot of other, coworkers or other people in the industry, just like, you look at what we fabricate. If you go to like Galaxy's Edge at Disney, like they didn't buy anything, right? They didn't buy the luggage. That was built one off.
I know. I love to go to those places and I try to figure out how it was built, right? And how I would build it. And then I wonder, is there a cooler, neater technique that I don't even know about that's being used to build this that I must learn? So, and I think it's that drive that keeps us always striving to understand. But you got to look outside your industry and you got to look at because some of the tech that's out there, especially now, is just unbelievable. And you'd be remiss not to integrate it.
It's also humbling. I try to remember that no matter how good we are at all these little different tasks that make up being a car audio related fabricator, a little bit of carpenter, a little bit of interior, a little bit of electrical, like all of those things. It's all installers kind of brag about that. They're like, I'm really good at all these little things. Oh, and look at this, a backup drink coming in.
Ooh,
nice.
Good service.
Wow, look at that. That is good service.
Say hi, Steve.
Don Bell is waving and saying hi to everyone.
Hi, Don.
They say hi. As much as we all brag about being able to we have so many different skills from all these different other, we can weld, we can do this, we can do that. I'm like, that there's like some dude that makes $8 an hour that's like way better at every single one of those things than you are. That I think of that to humble myself sometimes. As good as we think we are at anything, like there's some guy that knows so much more about that one little thing.
Yep.
So stay humble with it.
Yeah, it's true. But, it reminds you that, it's not necessarily a bad thing to be kind of a jack of many trades, right? You don't have to master them all. You have to master the ones that are the most important. And you have to have a working knowledge of some of them that are enough to get you by. And you have to know which one is the most important. I mean, you can't be the best at everything. Look at TIG welding is a perfect example. You can spend your whole life making beautiful TIG welds. And there's guys that could do it, and it's unbelievable. But that's a time-taking skill set. There's no way else to learn that. So you have to decide what you want to spend your time doing.
Now, out of all the builds that you did at Alpine, which one do you feel you were like the most proud of? Unveiling it, best reaction, just the first car you think of when I say that. What's the car?
Man, that's a tough one. I go back and forth, but I'd probably have to say Sinister 6. I just love the car so much.
Oh, I guess just in case.
Civic. Well, yeah. See, that's what I mean. Like they all have their time and place, but some of them had a little bit more of me in them, like meaning my own personal style in them versus what I thought was right for the car. Civic's a good example. The center drive thing in the Civic was it was revolutionary, right? I mean, at the time, nobody was doing it, and it was the one thing that set that car apart. But that car was like, I look back on it now, and it's very stuck in its time, stuck in its time range, right? It looks like when it was built for, and it doesn't really hold up very well now, in my opinion. Whereas the Sinister Six, I always thought that it looks like a concept car, and it was meant to look like a concept car. I still think it would make a great concept car. You know,
It's crazy. I've actually gotten a few messages on Facebook over the last year as BMW has changed up their grills and saying like,
right?
you guys were on it. You guys were on it.
Yeah.
And then you think back some of the stuff we did on that car, like the rear view mirror cameras, like that we thought it was kind of cool, but it's like legit now. Like that's starting to become a thing. Like,
somebody's gonna copy that door rotation for an e-mobility car, I guarantee you. But yeah, that was probably my favorite, just because it has a good combination of just badass strikingness from the outside, and then you hit that button and you that unexpected combination of things start to happen. I think the reaction to that was probably the craziest I've seen.
It was also the first kind of like, I mean, obviously it was the first car when I was there that I got to be a part of, but like it really deviated. As much as that car was kind of the deviant of the bunch, it was the like kind of darker, not so corporate-y. Like it wasn't fluffy. It wasn't like kind. It was just like, we want to build a badass car.
And you had to put it in the context of the day, right? Look at what else was popular then, and it was definitely a departure. And we were trying to always do that. We were trying to kind of look at where the trends were, and then kind of push it a little bit, and where's it going, and then let's try to take it there, not just do what everybody else is doing.
So that car, did you finish that with enough time? Did that get right up to the deadline? Let me know that one.
Okay, I'll answer that with there's never enough time, and
right.
There's always it's always right up to down to the wire. I mean, some were worse than others. I think the boat was probably the worst, but
no.
So?
RLS.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, the RLS, because we had
painting it in the booth. Like, can we talk about this story?
Yeah, so we did a candy paint job on the RLS, which, if you know about paint, so with candy, you put the silver down first, and then you put candy apple down, and then you clear it. Well, in between that candy apple and the silver that's an important bond, and it's kind of hard to get right because you can't really overscuff it. You got to get it right. And anyway, long story short, we didn't do a good job of that, or the painter, I should say, didn't do a good job of that. And we got to the booth. Once we got it to the booth, we were putting it under different lighting. We were putting it under.
When we say booth, we mean the
CES
display booth at CES.
At CES, yes.
Not the paint booth.
Yeah, not the paint. Yeah. So we put it in the booth at CES, all painted, and we realized, man, this thing's got some deep swirl marks in it, right? It's because the clear hadn't really cured correctly, so it was soft and it was hard to buff. So we had a local guy, actually. If you are fans of Count's Customs and Counting Cars, it's Ghetto Ryan, the painter from that show. That's the guy. So anyway, we're in Vegas, and through our network of friends, we get in contact with Ryan, and he agrees to come help us with the car. And so he goes, well, let me start buffing on it. So he starts buffing on it. About 5 minutes later, there's no more paint on the side of the car. He'd buffed through the candy into the silver because the layers basically peeled apart between the paint wasn't cured correctly. And this guy actually painted the side of that damn car in the CES booth.
We kicked everybody out. We taped the whole booth off. We made like a plastic, like, I don't know. I think this is the first time the world is hearing of this. There's a few people that know because they were there. But yeah, we basically turned the entire CES booth into a paint booth and repainted the side of the car.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 days before CES actually opened. But
if you can imagine the panic, you've just spent how many thousands of hours and
oh my God, I can't even imagine
on this car. And now you've got a giant hole buffed in the side of it. It's like there's nothing else to do but move forward. Like you can't do anything else. There's no way to hide it. You got to fix it. So that's what we did. And to this day, I can't believe the job Ryan did of matching the paint. It looks amazing.
candy paint is so hard to match, and
Oh, I
then you
know.
just do it out of your environment on the fly. That's not the only Alpine project he's been a part of in the booth. I remember some pinstriping one
Yeah,
year, and
yeah. That
yeah,
sometimes, like
Ryan is good people.
absolutely. It's absolutely, man. He saved our bacon on that one.
So yeah, it does come down to the line every time.
Oh, every time.
As many seconds as you would give us, we would take them to keep making it better.
And that's the thing, like I mentioned before about you have the fab part and the finished part. Well, that's great, but the reality is you really try to push your fab part as much as you can because that's the creative part. Once you stop doing that, it's just all labor from there on out. It's all work, and it sucks. It's repetitive, spraying and sanding the same piece 10 different times to get it perfect. And so you naturally, I think, as a human, push the fun part a little further than you should, and you compress the not so fun part, and so it makes that the end part even more challenging.
And I don't know what you guys did before I was there, but we always have to thank Glenn and Reno, Robert, like all the guys that like took on a lot of the we'll just call it the shit work. Like it was,
we had a lot of assistance over the years. Yeah, it takes a lot of hands to get some of those things done.
Man, I'm trying to remember the kid that we ran into at the show up in, was it Oregon or Seattle or somewhere we were for a show, and we ran into little Chris that had the center drive Scion XB, Roberts, Chris Roberts, who we had him come down to help with the boat. Like you were talking about center drive, and like we go to the show, and this kid's like the biggest Alpine fan in the world, and he's converted his car that he drives every day to a center drive because of Alpine cars.
I know.
It was like the craziest thing.
So cool.
diehard. And he came down to help us on the boat. It was awesome.
So after the whole car show demo car builds, obviously you take on a updated position with Alpine. I think you kind of head the whole restyle movement.
Yeah, what's your title now?
Yeah.
You got
what's the current
promotion
title?
recently, sir?
I'm the marketing director now.
Oh, that sounds fancy. What's that mean?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. My role has changed, and it's less hands-on creativity, but there's still a lot of the same level of creativity built into it, and a lot of the same tenets apply to me. I applaud innovation. I love innovation. I like things that are new. I like things that are unique. And I think Alpine's kind of a brand that's synonymous with that. And it's something that we always strive to do. We try to do things different than other manufacturers do them. And it's because we just have a unique philosophy. We have a great bunch of people. We put those people on the road. We put those people in front of our customers. And that's, I think, what makes a company what it is. And I think that's what's, kept our reputation strong over the years and some of the approaches to the market. And I still enjoy it. I still love the industry, and I still love seeing the innovation. And like I said, the people, it just keeps me going.
What's the last thing that you've built?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Probably the last cool thing that I built in 2014, I took on a jet boat project. I actually completely gutted and stripped this tunnel hole jet boat and built it from scratch. And, I built it in my garage. It took me about, I guess, almost a year from completion, from start to completion. But I did everything on it. I built the motor mounts. I painted it. I did all the fabrication on it. And I did some glass work on it, some unique custom work on it. And it was fun. It was cool getting my hands dirty and getting kind of back into it. I built a lot of little small stuff over the years with Alpine after the demo cars, but that was kind of the one big thing that I did for myself that I really enjoyed and kind of applied some of the same techniques to.
And on top of that, I remember seeing the dryer setup for the air compressor line. So Steve lived pretty close to the ocean. So Matt, you should see what he used to have in the garage, where I believe you painted that boat. There was the most intricate, like up. I don't even explain it. Explain it, Steve.
The problem with compressed air, and especially with painting with compressed air, is when you compress air, it squeezes the moisture out of it, right? And you got to do something with that moisture. And, I lived pretty close to the ocean at the time, and there was so much moisture in the air that no matter what I did, desiccant dryer, I tried traps, I tried everything, I couldn't get enough of the water out, and you'd always end up with fish eyes and paint. So what I did is I created this system of 3/4 inch. I just sweated 3/4 inch copper pipe and I brought it up and then down and then up and then down and then up and then down. So I have about, let's say, 200 feet of pipe on this little rack. And at the bottom of each one of those U's, I had a valve. So it would just, the air would flow through there and it would go from out of the compressor at, let's say, 200 degrees. By the time it got to the other end of this thing, it acts like a radiator, so it cools the air. And by the time it got to the end, all the water had dropped out into those little traps. And you got dry air. It worked great. I still have it. I still have it in my setup in Michigan for the same reason, because, humidity in the air.
It was like a work of art. It was a lot of pipe, that's for sure.
It's a lot of pipe, yeah. A lot of sweating.
So do you think there's ever going to be a day in which you have your hands in some sort of pretty big project for Alpine again? Is that ever going to happen?
It might. If the boys at Michigan have anything to do with it. Yeah, I mean, my time's split doing, different things now. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's created it really, shifted everybody's perspective on everything, obviously, but caused us to kind of look a little more internally and do some more planning. And so I'm excited to, as we hope these restrictions start to loosen, we can start to see the benefits of that and exercise some of the things that we've been working on in the background. There's some cool stuff.
Hey, I do have some video of you chopping up some stuff on one of the Jeeps, like just a couple of years ago. Wasn't that long ago you were getting dirty? Yeah,
that's true. We did. Yeah, the Jeep thing was, the restyle movement was certainly fun, and getting to hang out with Jeep people in general. Jeep people are great. Probably my most fun customer demographic, because Jeep people, they love to spend money and they love to have fun. So they're down for pretty much whatever, and it's been cool developing products that those guys dig.
Yeah, I just did a Jeep Rubicon from Russia.
Oh wow.
Dude, shipped him a car from Russia to do.
Yeah. It's and it was not even a small project. It was like upwards of 50, 60 grand for an audio system. We had to make this an acoustic environment, which is so hard.
You picked the worst one. That thing's terrible.
Oh my God. But I will say at the end of it, and it did have a motorized soft top, but at the end of the day, it literally sounded like a high-end SUV when you're driving down the road. You could barely hear any kind of road noise, even though, it was lifted and had big tires on it. We had to do like 4 or 5 layers acoustic mat just on the floor, just to really keep all that out. I mean, it was pretty incredible. But like you were saying with Jeep people, my other niche is Tesla, which it's almost like the opposite demographic, where they love spending money and they love making it unique. And I would say the Jeep and the Tesla, they're like the same type of client in which they just love customizing that car.
Yeah. And they're not afraid to spend money on it. That used to be, I mean, there's less examples of that now. There used to be a lot more examples of that, but they're still out there. But I think you pointed out a couple of good ones, guys they're still willing to upgrade and spend money on their vehicles.
What I heard you sold your truck when you moved to Michigan. What are you driving these days?
Well, I sold my Tundra and bought another Tundra. So I sold my 08 and I bought the new body style one, but it's pretty basic. I mean, I think I have a 5-channel amp in it, R speakers. I built a little ported 8-inch sub that fits underneath the glove box that I love it. The thing sounds killer.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it doesn't dig, but what it needs is like a ported 12 under the back seat to go along with it. Then
Access cab or Crew Max?
It's a Crew Max.
I got a box for that. We do a bunch of stuff for Tundras now.
They screwed the Tundra up. The old Tundra used to be awesome with the sliding seat. I had 312s on the old Tundra. And this one, I mean, short of raising the seat up, there's not a whole lot you can get under there,
I can almost get you a single Type R10 behind that seat. I do an S. I just shipped one yesterday that had a Type S8 in it.
I need one. I need to tune one. I need to tune it about 30.
The one we just shipped.
That's all I need.
2 days ago, we did a Type S8 ported, tuned at 30 hertz behind the seat in a Crew Max.
Boy, I love that.
We put this. We have this amp company we've been using. That's, I don't know. I'm not going to give them any props yet, but we'll let them prove themselves. But we put we'll just quote unquote 800 watts on a single Type S8, and it got down. It definitely got down.
That's getting it.
Yep. No, it didn't even smell like burnt Band-Aids. So
you're not trying hard enough.
Well, next time.
So with current Alpine product, like the restyles that come out, do you have any influence in like bezel design or layout or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I start. Well, I guess one of my roles for about 3 years was being, I was in charge of the direction of those products. So we got to kind of design the layout and the fit and finish. And once you get the basics right, then you can just kind of tweak it from there. Once we learned kind of the basic configuration, like for JK Jeep, people really loved the design. They just wanted a little bit more. So we made it a little more rugged. We made it a little more water.
Yeah.
We made it waterproof. It wasn't originally waterproof, and we just kind of evolved it. And that's one of the kind of the neat things about that project. It's a good example of building a product and then just really fine tuning it with feedback. We listen to, go to these Jeep shows. We'd listen to customers. We'd see how they were using the Jeeps and, some of the challenges, the sunlight, the dust, the water, and how it was really affecting the stuff. And, we kept making it better. And we really made a product that those guys like and they resonate with. And that's a result of 2 or 3 generations of taking feedback and improving as we go.
So I would say, just based on the restyle that I just did in the JL Jeep, my only feedback of what I wish could be improved was if the button colors were RGB, where you could control, whether you want them white, a different color,
Right.
because the orange, they illuminate orange, but the buttons in the dash illuminate white, I believe. And then he had some other buttons that were a little bit different.
Yeah, it depends on the trim. So yeah, some of them are different. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to compromise with those things depending on the trim that you're looking at. RGB lighting, being integrating into those kits can sometimes be challenging because it's not just a radio, you're having to integrate in the buttons as well. The buttons are actually one of the more expensive parts of those kits. To tool and fabricate those buttons and to have them produced in usually at the OEM level, that's done in quantities of hundreds of thousands, and we're not building them in those bigger quantities. So it's pretty challenging to be able to do those relatively economically.
So talking about restyle, I've personally seen where there's different kits in Europe versus the United States. Like they got some really cool stuff from Mercedes, Audi that just hasn't been available in the US. Why is that?
Well, the main reason is popularity. Believe it or not, you think, a Mercedes that's sold here is going to be the same kind of popularity as a kit that they developed there, but it's really not the case for several reasons. I think part of it's the clientele. I think part of it is the feature set of those units. Sometimes the feature set in Europe, for example, may not match really what's here. And to be able to transfer it back and forth is more difficult than you think, and it adds a lot of cost. And so when you layer on the low volume, a lot of times it doesn't make financial sense to do it. That's usually why.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, because obviously in the US we have basically all the trucks covered, all your off-roading, the stuff that a lot of all the domestic vehicles.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you got to look at what is having car audio installed in it, right? By and large, trucks are, the most top 1, 2, 3 vehicles sold in the US, first of all. And the clientele of a truck, the buyer of a truck is probably more apt to want to upgrade, right? Because he's just that type of a dude. And he's probably going to be a little more apt to do that than some of the other categories. So it's a little bit easier to predict the viability of those types of products.
What's your best-selling Alpine product today?
You mean by volume?
Yeah, by volume.
It's probably like I was going to say, is it like a Type S 6.5 coax?
Yeah. I mean, those speakers and stuff are pretty popular, but believe it or not, the pandemic, as I'm sure you guys are aware, has really caused a resurgence in car audio in a lot of ways. I mean,
I've never been so busy.
It's interesting. And everybody had the same reaction when it started. Everybody pulled back on their forecasts and stopped the presses. But then 2 months later, the demand was through the roof, and everybody's supply chain was stopped. So it created this rift. And we've seen a huge revival. The 650 has driven a lot of it. I think the CarPlay, it hits a price point. It's a good quality unit. It works well. It's a good system builder. So yeah, and I talked earlier about Unique. One of the things that we're finding a lot of success with is Power Stack, because we've got this thin chassis head unit now. It doesn't have a CD or DVD mech in it anymore. So we thought, well, why are we wasting this DIN space? We might as well put an amp back there. So that's what we did. We make a 4-channel or a mono amp that'll bolt back there, and you start thinking about the system building capability of a product like that, and it's unbelievable, right? You can bolt a 4-channel amp on there to start, or you can bolt a mono amp back there to start. And then maybe the next step is you buy a 4-channel to bolt back there and you put the mono somewhere else, and now you got a full system. And then maybe you add more sub and add more amp. And the point is, we're trying to get people into the Alpine experience and keep them in there with a different levels of products that step up as their taste step up.
I do have one humongous gripe with the 650. You want to take one guess? I'll stop you because you're struggling. It's too cheap.
I'm struggling. Yes,
it's too cheap.
Gary, I think I don't think you can make that recommendation in your position in the car audio world. You're not that guy.
It's too cheap. It's too cheap.
I got news for you. It's a constant battle,
Yeah.
And it's tough. The market's tough. You have to struggle between some of these price point type products and also unique. Look at the Halo product. Now you got everybody copying that product. Alpine was the first one out with it. And that's the kind of thing that Alpine does. We take the chance. CVA 1000. You remember that product when it came out? The motorized faceplate?
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I saw that product, and it absolutely blew my mind. And that's kind of that's what I mean when I say Alpine has an innovative history. It's those types of products. We try to push the envelope. And I always like to use the example of the iPhone, right? Nobody knew they needed the iPhone until the iPhone came out. Before that, you had a flip phone or you had a BlackBerry, and BlackBerry was your business phone. So it revolutionized the industry and people's use of the technology in ways that they could never imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And well, maybe it's a little heady for a car audio conversation. The restyle thing was about getting a larger screen into the dash of your car, period. Because we saw that happening with OEs. We know that's where the trend was happening. The limitation of that, though, was having to build the dash kit for every single one of those vehicles to get the big screen in. Mm-hmm. The innovation with restyle was it resulted in Halo, right? Because now it's a way to take that large screen that we proved the need for, but by making it universal, now it can go in just about any car, and it's a lot more affordable. And it doesn't require custom fabrication to get it to go in there.
Yeah, which started its own movement in its own right, because now you see every other company following suit with their own modular style, which I always like using the Halo because the Halo is the most indicative of the European style, which in a lot of cases I found myself doing them in those type of cars.
Yeah, and it's funny how taste changed too. When I first saw that product, it kind of it took me a little while to warm up to it, because it's so different. But now, well, I mean, you see, look at the OEs. I mean, all the OEs are doing it. Tesla, that's the only thing that's in a dash is just a screen stuck on there. It's not it's getting away from the having to integrate it and really kind of being able to free yourself from that and being able to make it more flexible and more usable in a lot more applications.
But even most cars like Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Mazda, they all have a screen that looks almost identical to the Halo, which is mounted in a modular style on the dashboard. Yep. So Halo fits right in.
Well, and we were talking about VHub Pro a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Sinister 6, and that was
one of my favorite personal vehicles. The first new vehicle I ever bought actually was a 2006 Toyota Tundra. Remember the first generation, the smaller bi-style? And I don't know if you remember those, but they had this kind of weird rounded center console, and they had a lid that flipped forward. And in that flip forward lid, I actually put a screen for the VHub Pro, and I had the VHub Pro controller right below it. And that was the coolest. I love the integration of that system because it was completely seamless. It was invisible if you didn't want it to be, but it was completely useful if you wanted it to be.
Was your blue truck was an 08?
Yeah, that was the second one. I bought that after the 06.
Yeah.
So the Alpine boat, because the 06 didn't have enough power to tow the damn thing.
Yeah, I remember. I just bought an 07, by the way. I'm a Tundra owner now.
Those are great trucks, man. That 5.7, it'll pass anything but a gas station.
Yep, that's for sure. So not that we want to turn this into a fucking Alpine commercial, but what do you think the 3 most important Alpine products of all time are?
Ooh. Well, there's one easy one that comes to mind, the 7909. That's kind of a no-brainer, I think, because it was in a way the first high-performance CD player. I think is a fair statement. It had a lot of things that now are considered standard on high-end units, like high voltage preamp outputs, for example. At the time, it had some really unique things being going on in the transport that was making it cool. Obviously, nobody cares about CD anymore, but at the time it was very unique and very innovative. So I think that's definitely one. I think F1 status in general. I mean, maybe not one product, but I think the direction of that product, and we always say, F1, it's called F1 because it's meant to do the same thing in our engineering world as F1 does for cars. It's meant to push the envelope. And it's meant to make our engineers think in those ways and do new innovative things that are the opposite of what you do to sell a product, right? When you can put aside your sales hat, meaning this amount volume and this price point, which is what you have to do with most every other product. F1 allows you to engineer it from a more purist perspective and not have to worry so much about those things and make it the best it can be. And the third one's a little tougher.
It's not Blackbird, is it?
It's definitely not Blackbird.
Sorry, I had to.
There's only three rules about Alpine. You don't talk about Blackbird, you don't talk about Blackbird, and you don't talk about Blackbird.
Exactly. Yeah. Oddly enough, I would probably say it's Halo, because Halo, I think in the modern generation it's the think of one dash innovation that's more unique than that. I mean, you can say CarPlay, but CarPlay is not unique. I mean, I think it's revolutionized the industry for sure, and that's proven by the amount of people we have copying us.
I would say PDX would have made that list for me by far.
Yeah.
PDX was certainly a good example. This is another good story. The sales of PDX for the first year were very poor, and there's a very simple reason for it. It's nobody believed that it made the power that it made, because at the time you had to have an amplifier this big to make 1,000 watts. Nobody believed that would make 1,000 watts, and it just had to happen slowly, by word of mouth and by trial and error. We could talk to her blue in the face, guys. This thing's amazing. You got to try it. But until Gary tells Matt how badass it is, and he needs to put it in his car, it didn't happen. It took about a year for that to happen, and then it took off.
Remember the Yaris?
Yeah.
Remember the box in the back of the Yaris with the single PDX amp on the? Man, was that some fun! Man,
dude, that amp was unbelievable.
But yeah, it is fun to kind of look back at the history as you see it all in sequence, and how many products that Alpine made that kind of changed what all the other brands and manufacturers were doing to kind of follow suit. I mean, there's so many. Yeah,
that's right. And I'll tell you, being that innovator is not easy. There's some failures too. It's not all roses. There's some of them that you make and everybody likes. They say they like it. It's great, but you don't sell enough of them to pay for the tooling. So sometimes you got to pay the piper, and it's tough. It's tough to find that balance of innovation and market viability. You have to do that by kind of balancing things. You have to have innovative products like Halo, and you have to have bread and butter products like the 650, and you have to make sure they both work together. Because at the end of the day, the way dealers sell our products are by the availability of all the things that they need within one brand. If they can do it in our brand, they will. But if they have to step outside of our brand to get it, then they will. We have to keep Alpine viable in every way to these guys' livelihood, essentially, and that's the key to long-term success for us.
And when it comes to making products, it's kind of like playing poker. You have to see a lot of hands. You have to ante up. You have to try. You have to give it a chance to let this hand develop and see what's going to win and what's going to lose.
And sometimes you've got to bring a product out to market that's not exactly what you want it to be, with the intent of learning for the next one. And Jeep's a good example of that. Bringing things to market and then learning as we go. And you just have to pay attention, and you have to be open-minded and willing to keep pushing and keep innovating, much like the car audio industry in general, right?
What is a product that Alpine brought out that you either feel like it was too soon, or it should have done better than it did, or is there anything that sticks out in your mind as something that, like, you think
Yeah,
either would be more viable now or missed its
absolutely.
time?
I mean, I'll give you a good example. Did you know that Alpine was the first company to make wireless CarPlay?
Car audio company?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I knew that.
But that particular product, it wasn't. It just never took off. I think it was a little bit. It was a little before its time. It's a good example of it seems good, and it's not necessarily bad to try some of these things, but in that particular case, the market wasn't ready for it. Wireless charging's not developed. You got iPhones that don't have long enough battery life to really support it. So it was kind of a project that wasn't ready for the light of day. And it happens sometimes. You take a shot, and sometimes things work in your favor, and sometimes things don't. The Marine line, there's a perfect example. Alpine built a great Marine line in 2008. Now, you might remember something else significant from 2008, which was the global economic collapse and the fact that probably 50-ish% of the boat builders in the world went out of business that year. So, timing is another important factor. And in that case, we spent millions of dollars and developed this great product that we launched into a market and just had the bottom fall out of it. It was tragic. It sucks. And we put all this time and effort into it and really had something great, but there's factors beyond your control, and it
Yeah.
didn't work.
I feel like a couple of things from my point of view. I think one of the products that if you could bring it back today would do better now with a few little tweaks. The imprint processor that went directly to the radio. I don't
Yeah.
remember what the model number was. What was that thing retailed for? Some insanely cheap, like $149.
Yeah. You're thinking you're like PSA H100, right? The
Yeah, I
plug
think
in.
so.
Yeah, and
I
that
think
one.
so.
Yeah.
The
Well,
processing power that thing had for $149.
yeah.
If we had
Wait a
the
minute.
ability to control it from a laptop
Mhm.
today, it would blow everything out of the water, and it was available 12 years ago, 15 years ago from
Mhm.
Alpine.
Yeah.
Like it's mind blowing. Like
I don't know
if
why
I would have
everybody wants to
known.
overcomplicate the processor. We're guilty of it too. We have some nice pieces out there, but you really have to know what you're doing to tune it. In most cases, you're going to do more harm than good if you get in there and start tweaking knobs and buttons. But I think the market is right for a simplified processor. But you think about really what's going on in the OE. The OE head units. Most of the cars that I would buy today, I probably wouldn't change a head unit.
Yeah. And as long as you have, I mean, Matt and I both deal with this on a daily basis, but most of the cars that we do now, you can either get a great interface, whether it's nav TV or pack
Mhm.
Yeah.
um, like a Mobridge style piece.
Mhm.
Um, or we have like I don't know if Steve knows this or not, but we've been doing a ton of Tundra stuff, and even on the systems where we're grabbing high level signal, like we're making some great sounding cars
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
what if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I could have done it that way, and I would have been like, oh hell no, we're going to use a high res player, we're going to go
Yeah.
directly into it. It's like
Mhm.
we're getting decent sound out of some of these cars, and the
Yeah.
processing is the key on the back end,
Yeah.
like by far.
Plus with Bluetooth nowadays, that gives you a huge opportunity to do like a Bluetooth digital input into the processor. And in most cars, you can actually pair your phone to the factory radio, your phone to this interface going directly into the processor, and you're just choosing on your phone. We're directing the audio to the processor, and it looks like you're using the factory radio,
Yeah.
even though you're not. That's taking the information, the album art, all that stuff, and you're going perfect digital signal directly to the processor.
Right. Mental note: develop a way to use that and have steering wheel controls, control volume
There
in the
you go. Yeah.
processor. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Make hundreds of dollars.
Yes, you could be a thousandaire easily.
Make hundreds.
In mere years.
In mere years, you too could have hundreds of dollars. So what's next? What's next for you? What's next for Alpine?
Well, like I said, we got some big announcements coming. Yeah, I mean, we're still pushing it. That's all I can say. We've got some cool stuff in the pipeline. We're not going anywhere. We're too stubborn to die. And I'll say one other thing. The move to Michigan has been very fortuitous for us, I think, for a couple of reasons. Michigan has become just an unbelievable hotbed for automotive technology, and the amount of talent in that city is just crazy, or state. But around where we're at in Auburn Hills, there are automotive supplies everywhere. And so we've been able to really utilize some of that talent. We've got a great team of guys in our Auburn Hills office that, they're car audio guys, they're fabricators, they're guys that came from the industry, but they're applying their skills to different things. They're building these top secret OE prototypes that are unbelievable. I mean, some of the stuff these guys are doing. So being able to apply that and take that brain power that's kind of a result of the innovation going on in the OEs, which I think you guys will agree is it's incredible, the amount of tech that's driving OE development. And as you see, e-mobility coming, and electrification coming, and some of these other hybrid technology, some of these other things that are driving that industry, applying that to our side is inevitable, and it's going to help. It's going to help us grow it and make it better. Gives us more understanding of what's already in the car, so that we can work around it and work with it.
A lot of people, if they can project where car audio is going to be in 5-10 years, I think a lot of people see it as a more or less of a dying industry. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to be in a place where, as a driver, you're kind of doing less and less.
Yeah,
So it's more of like, now you're home.
Yeah.
And you're controlling the environment around you to enjoy the environment more than you did in the past. Because in the past, you had to have more control. You had to be more cognizant of driving. Now, as we're seeing, there's, braking assistance, there's lane-to-lane assistance, there's, autopilot. There's all these things now that it's only going to keep going to where we're going to be enjoying tech more and more in the car, which is what we do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I see the same direction. And if you think about the way people use cars now, it's going to change, but in a lot of ways it'll be the same. And I think people are going to still use their vehicles as kind of a personal space, but I think the technology will make it a more flexible personal space, right? A more flexible space that we can apply even higher levels of audio and integration of some of these different technologies into. So yeah, I mean, we're really looking to the future and excited about what it's going to turn into. I think it's going to be good for us.
So with CES this year is canceled, as far as I know, right?
Yeah,
and
virtual only. Yeah, but
one more time,
virtual. They're doing a virtual event, but yeah, it's the physical event's canceled.
So last year was the first time I've been going to CES since 90. I think my first CES was either 92 or 93. So I've been going a couple years.
Few years,
missed a couple here and there. But I feel like last year, maybe it was the year before last, was the first year that I walked in to the North Hall and I really felt that the world had changed, right? Like CES as I knew it was gone. It had completely, the days of the sands and the demo vans outside, or the early years at the convention center with the vans lined up out front and the Dr. Frankensteins of the world out there and the Crossfires giving big bass demos, that stuff was gone.
Green aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like car audio as we knew it was irrelevant and unimportant. And what was important was these driverless cars and all this autonomous stuff was really, it made me feel old. It made me like not recognize CES, and it was kind of an eye opener, right? So as we move forward this year, we're not going to have a real CES. We didn't have a real SEMA. What do you guys, do you have stuff planned to kind of make up for that? Are you doing product launches? You doing it separate? What's the
we're going to do a virtual, we're going to take a virtual approach. We do a December sales meeting every year, as you remember, Gary,
Yep.
to kind of launch a line with our rep force, which we're going to do that virtually. And then we're going to replace CES in some way. We haven't determined exactly what it's going to be yet, and we think the timing will be a little bit later than CES typically would be to talk about some of the 21 stuff with the dealers. And, it's a tough year. I mean, it's kind of odd, right? Everything's gone virtual, or virtual as far as the presentations, but the car audio guys are busy right now. I mean, there's not really a lot of time to be screwing around listening to what new manufacturers have to say right now. They're busy, and that's a good thing. We want them to be. So, we're okay with scaling it back a little bit and minimizing it, and we'll be back strong for 2022.
Has the product development cycle been changed because of COVID?
Yeah, there's been some delays, in the supply chain. It's affected some things, delayed some things for sure, and it's put a lot more pressure on manufacturing. It's definitely been a challenge for sure. You mentioned earlier, Gary, about CES changing, and I've noticed the same thing. But I'll tell you one thing that makes me pretty happy is that new cars and new car manufacturers are using the dashboard to sell their cars, right?
Yeah.
That's good for us. I mean, because at the end of the day, no matter how much tech these guys are putting into the dashboard, and it's pretty unbelievable. They're still going to put $10 speakers in the doors, and there's going to be
They
opportunities.
still got to make money. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's important to understand. Everybody wants to try to predict the death of this industry, and what we sell is a musical experience that's, in my opinion, like no other. It's accessible, it's attainable, it's something that you can do every day, and it's something that can improve your outlook on life. I mean, we provide a positive service to the world, and I think there's always going to be a need for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as we remain relevant and we remain innovative, we'll be able to be competitive. And so I have no doubt that we can continue this industry as long as we're willing to put in the effort it takes, just like we always have, to be innovative and push the envelope.
Yeah, you just got to always adapt or die. I mean,
That's
it's getting to the point where you're absolutely going to see more of the uneducated shops who aren't continuing their education to adapt with the cars. They will eventually die because, again, if you don't have the know-how to use a DSP in a modern car to achieve better sound, better than they give you, right? Because manufacturers are now giving you a better baseline sound. So unless you can achieve better than that, you're going to die.
Yep.
And that's where we're going to see some of the, I don't know, mom and pop shops who aren't really continuing that education. But I think that's really the only shift that you're going to see within our industry, to where there's going to be less of those super uneducated shops that are putting out less than stellar work.
Yep. The demand for it, I think, is going to continue. And, there's a lot of other categories beyond car that have grown. Marine has gotten bigger, RV, as the economy has grown and continue to do well. Side by side, off road, those types of power sports type categories are all helping drive the business too. So there's still a lot of opportunity for shops that are willing to do the work.
Yeah. Gary, you alive over there?
I'm alive. I'm thinking. I don't know where else to go. That seems like a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff. That's like 2 hours.
Yeah, we can wrap it up.
Is there anything else, Steve, that you want to touch on? Any Alpine marketing message?
No, I mean, there's nothing. I'm not gonna pitch you guys. Let's put it that way. I mean, you know the brand, you know what we're about. I mean, there's a reason I've been with the company for as long as I have. It's a company that I believe in. I enjoy it, like the people I work with, like what the brand stands for. And there's a lot of good brands in this industry, and we need them all. We need them to continue. We need them to keep doing what they're doing. So, we love the competition. Bring it on.
I think competition is good, and I think that kind of the
competition is great.
Yeah,
anyone good needs some sort of competition.
100%.
Yeah, you need somebody to push you, and if you're not trying to be better, because it's hard to get that motivation from within. And if you have somebody that you feel is coming up close behind you, it makes you, whether you're in a race or whatever, you're trying to go faster because the guy's right on your tail. And I think that leads to good things for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And we're all competitive, but we all know each other at the same time, and I think that's it's that kind of industry. It's a small industry relatively. We've all been at it for a long time, and I think we all want to keep doing it. So maybe that says something about our character.
This industry is a lot like a cult. I mean, even the clients are like part of the cult, right? They've grown up. They've had it in high school. They had systems that they want to kind of bring back to life in their new modern car. I mean, that's my key demographic, is the guys who had a nice car in the 90s, in high school, in college, and now they're, CEO of a company or something along those lines, and now they want to do and replicate the same thing that they had in high school, and they know that their car now just isn't achieving that, and they just don't trust the random shop to work on that car. That's what I feel like the key demographic is. And it's almost like they're part of the same cult that we're working in. They're part of the same crew. It's
Yeah,
fun.
the time is right. I mean, that's what drove the muscle car boom. That's what drove the Harley boom for a while. I mean, it's the right age group coming of age, and car audio. That's its heyday was at late '80s, early '90s, and that's when a lot of guys Gary and I's age we're getting to the point where we're financially stable. Some of us have kids that are pretty much out of the house, so it's time to relive the glory years. And man, like I said, car audio is a great way to do it. I mean,
it's fun. I mean, we're a passion industry. It's not like if I hire a guy to do drywall in my house, I do that out of necessity.
Yeah.
Whereas like car audio, I'm doing it because I'm passionate.
We don't sell medicine.
Yeah.
Nobody needs what we sell at all. We're the first thing to get cut when times are tough.
Yeah. So right off the bat, when a client calls, I mean, we jive right away because we both have something in common.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. The passion is the thing. And when you can talk to other people that share it, it certainly motivates me.
Cool. So I think we'll end with this. What was are you going with the BMW as your favorite Alpine build ever? Or Sinister? Or which one? Okay.
One. I mean, I'm a boat guy. I love the boat. I actually still own the boat. But as far as, the overall, taking all things into consideration, I think that vehicle was the kind of the peak in a lot of ways with a lot of the things that we did and a lot of the techniques. And, I just felt like it really embodied kind of everything that we really set out to do as that direction.
There were a lot of boxes that were checked off with that car.
Yeah.
A lot of boxes.
Definitely.
So I appreciate you for coming on, giving us your time. And I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy this. It doesn't matter if you're in the industry or if you're a client. I mean, I think everyone is going to, even if you're a client, you're going back to the old Alpine days. And I mean, all this is so relevant. So again, I just want to thank you for giving us your time and coming on and talking.
I always take the opportunity to talk car audio. So
yeah, it's
our first
any juncture.
Our first guest, like we couldn't think. We went through a list of people we wanted to have on.
It couldn't have been a more appropriate guest. And like I said, I think you were the person that kind of like, and you don't even know this like until I told you, but like I said, for me, you're what brought me into the industry, right? Those Alpine cars, and it was what you were trying to do at the time, trying to key into my demographic, but that's what brought me into the industry. And that's why I'm here. Yeah.
Maybe it worked.
Yeah.
That's
maybe
great.
It worked.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I could say I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, the work that you guys have done in the past. And I owe my whole livelihood to just seeing that in the magazines.
The older you get, Matt, you'll find that, the legacy that you leave behind becomes more important. And that's certainly one that I'm proud of.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely an interesting experience for me to be able to watch it kind of blossom before I got the opportunity to be there. And so it's definitely fun from my perspective to have inspected those cars at CES and inspired by them. And, I was building a lot of other stuff that was inspired by those cars. And then to be able to kind of walk in and be a part of it, from the inside, it was obviously pretty amazing.
Thrown into the fire.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And hold on. So just before we end this, what was your first thought of Gary as he was hired into Alpine the first week?
I got to tell the story from the other point of view.
Yeah.
So now
I want to hear
it from your
real
point
quick.
of view.
I want to hear your point of view.
Gary fit in really well, I thought, with our group. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. We clicked pretty much right away. We certainly had our differences as we worked through some problems. I mean, but it was never to the point where we really butted heads. I mean, we'd argue a little bit and then we'd decide what we're going to do and move on. But Gary had the vision from the beginning. I could tell the way that those vehicles were built. We had kind of an idea of what we wanted to do, but each person was responsible for their own sections.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how we worked. And you're going to get input from the other person and you're going to get help. But at the end of the day, that section is your responsibility. And to be able to accept that and to do it and to do it well at a high level, it's tough to do. And Gary was one of those guys that was able to come and jump on it. And he impressed me right away.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
I told him the story of
when you had kind of gotten your promotion and we were going to do the RLS and you were going to spend a little less time in the back and we brought Brent in and I told him the story of going to Dark Place and I'm like, and Steve's trying to tell us that like we need to tone it down. And I'm like, I don't know if Steve was trying to like save us from getting in over our heads or if he just drank too much of the Alpine Kool-Aid and was like so much like, no, it's all about the marketing message. I'm like, well, we still got to make people come to the car, right? Like we still have to do something impressive. Like I felt like I don't know from your point of view whether you were trying to save us or you were trying to like just put the brakes on it. But I always felt like
didn't really work either way, did it?
yeah, no, we fucked that all up. That's for sure. Man, if you can't get in over your head, what can you do, right?
I tell you, yeah, we to be able to get yourself that buried and then dig out though is it's quite a good feeling. Like you really feel like you can do anything.
Except for the boat. I think the boat was such a like I have never been is behind the eight ball as I have been on so many projects before. I don't think I've ever witnessed anything as miraculous as the boat actually getting completed.
Yeah, that thing was ridiculous.
Yeah, that was an insane amount of work.
Most people didn't really appreciate because most people aren't boat people, right?
Yeah, and you can't see it the way you can in a car.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
You need to see the before and after more, and it was one of the things I didn't really consider when we decided to do a boat because I've always kind of been into them. But to people who aren't into boats, it's not just that they're not into it; they just don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
Like boats, what is that?
I get that.
But I tell you, if you want to test your chops at any kind of tough environment, if it'll survive in a boat, it'll survive anywhere.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And that's a lot of real estate to cover too.
It really is. It's a lot of square inches of surface
Especially when
area.
you have to paint every single square inch of it, inside and out.
I was telling somebody the other day, there's those pictures. Remember those blocks that we built for the side of it? Like, there's like 5 foot long sanding blocks to like block out the side of that thing. We're like, hey, the side of this thing's wavy. Should we try to get it straight? Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Turns out they're all kind of crooked for a reason, I guess. I don't know. Whatever.
It's straighter than most of them.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Well, cool. So again, thank you for coming on and
absolutely
being the first guest. It was awesome. And yeah, people are going to love this for sure.
Well, I wish you guys the best of success in your podcast, especially that's what all the kids listen to these days. So I wish you all the best.
Oh, we appreciate it.
And hopefully this lasts long enough that we'll have you back on again.
Hey, sounds good. I'll see you in 100 episodes.
There you go.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And